Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit and welcome to this week's episode. So in this episode, I'm going to be sharing with you some of my contemplations for the week of September 25th, 2023. I cannot believe we are almost at the end of September. Pretty wild. We're almost done with 2023. And I want to invite you, before I share some of my thoughts and my reflections, to engage in a little practice with me. And feel free to do this in whatever ways feel good to you. I've allowed this to be more open-ended and to be tweakable to whatever feels accessible and available and delicious to you at this moment. So my invitation is for you to start noticing the left side of your body and the right side of your body. Right? And just go as deep or as shallow as you want. Like for some of you, maybe you just want to focus on a very neutral part of your body. Maybe that's your hands, right? Or maybe that's your left eye and your right eye, or your left ear and your right ear. Whatever feels neutral and accessible to you right now, notice the left and the right part of your body. If you're walking, maybe notice the relationship between the left leg and the right leg. If you're sitting and maybe you're excited to do a little bit of a deeper work, start noticing the right side of your pelvis maybe, and how it feels different in terms of its connection with the chair that you're currently sitting on, or the sofa, or whatever surface, to the left side. Are there maybe different sensations on your right and your left? And I invite you to notice how bringing your attention, bringing your awareness to the right side and the left sides of your body starts to shift your relationship with these two parts. They're obviously interconnected, right? And yet sometimes we tend towards one more than the other. And if you would like, and if it feels good to you, you may also want to start bringing attention to your breath. Notice what it's like to pay attention to both your left and your right nostril, and to breathe in with both the nostrils. I invite you and I welcome you to continue noticing the left and the right side of your body as you listen to some of these contemplations. And I'd like to begin by sharing something from The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. I just randomly opened the book and asked for something to share with all of you here for this coming week. And I love this passage. Experience provides wisdom to draw from, but it tempers the power of naivete. The past can be a teacher, offering tried and true methods, familiarity with the standards of the craft, awareness of potential risks, and in some cases, virtuosity. It lures us into a pattern that absolves us of the opportunity to engage innocently with the task at hand. The more ingrained your adopted approach, the harder it is to see past it. Though experience doesn't rule out innovation, it can make it more difficult to access. Animals, like children, don't have a hard time making a decision. They act out of innate instinct, not learned behavior. This primitive force packs an ancient wisdom that science has yet to catch up with. These childlike superpowers include being in the moment, valuing play above all else, having no regard for consequences, being radically honest without consideration, and having the ability to freely move from one emotion to the next without holding on to the story. For children, each moment in time is all there is. No future, no past. I want it now. I'm hungry. I'm tired. All pure authenticity. The great artists throughout history are the ones able to maintain this childlike enthusiasm and exuberance naturally. Just as an infant is selfish, they're protective of their art in a way that's not always cooperative. Their needs as a creator come first, often at the expense of their personal lives and relationships. For one of the most loved singer-songwriters of all time, if inspiration comes through, it takes precedence over other obligations. His friends and family understand that in the middle of a meal, conversation, or event, if a song calls, he'll exit the scene and tend to it without explanation. Accessing childlike spirit in our art and in our lives is worth aspiring to. It's simple to do if you haven't accumulated too many fixed habits and thoughts. If you have, it's very difficult, nearly impossible. A child has no set of premises it relies on to make sense of the world. It may serve you to do the same. Any label you assume before sitting down to create, even one as foundational as sculptor, rapper, author, or entrepreneur, could be doing more harm than good. Strip away the labels. Now, how do you see the world? Try to experience everything as if for the first time. If you grew up in a landlocked town that you never left, the first time you traveled and saw the ocean would likely be a dramatic, awe-inspiring experience. If you spent your whole life living near the ocean, your experience of it would almost certainly be less dramatic. When you see what's present around you as if for the first time, you start to realize how astonishing it all is. As artists, we aim to live in a way in which we see the extraordinary hidden in the seemingly mundane, then challenge ourselves to share what we see in a way that allows others a glimpse of this remarkable beauty. Talent is the ability to let ideas manifest themselves through you. So juicy. I love this passage a lot for this week because so I'm just going to do a little rundown, right? And you'll probably see if you're astrologically fluent why I think this is so appropriate for this week. So on Monday, the 25th, Mercury in Virgo will trine Jupiter, which is currently retrograde in Taurus. On Friday, the 29th, we have the full moon in Aries. And this full moon, the sun will conjoin Pallas, and the full moon will have a square to Vesta in Cancer. And then Venus in Leo will square Uranus, which is, as I mentioned, retrograde in Taurus. And then finally on Saturday, Mercury in Virgo will trine Uranus in Taurus, right? And so you can see that Mercury plays an important part of the work and the energy in this coming week. We also have this full moon in Aries that we're basically kind of inching towards, that are coming to fullness throughout essentially almost the whole week, right? Until Friday. And so when I sensed into this week, I was feeling into how this is a week of gateway energy, right? My sense is that there's an internal desire to move forward, to be brave, right? Maybe with a project that we've been working on, with our relationships, with the change that we've been working towards. And that internal desire is accompanied by the awareness of what it is that we still need to work on, or where we may not be quite fully resourced, right? So some of the questions that may be helpful for us all to contemplate this coming week are: where am I holding back out of fear? And where am I holding back because I don't quite have all the resources that I needed to move forward? Where am I invited to deepen into the genius of trust? And where do I need to address patterns of naivete that's rooted in some level of avoidance, right? And what I mean by this is, as Rick Rubin so beautifully articulated in that passage, right? There is kind of a genius to trusting, to dropping the labels, to just being in the moment, right? And there's also a kind of naivete. There's a kind of disrobing of the skills and experiences we've had in the past that has more to do with resistance, with not wanting to look at the thing with clarity, right? And so this is a great time to check in with our sense of strategy and our sense of balance. Balance is an art, right? Balance to me is really more a verb than a noun. Balance is not really a state that you arrive at, right? It's more a state that we pass through. We're in the midst of Libra season. I think this theme of balance is really present for many of us. We're always moving towards balance, right? Towards homeostasis. And as soon as we stumble upon balance, that state of balance begins to evaporate, right? As soon as we achieve balance, it starts to disintegrate. And that's natural. That's part of aliveness. So consider the playful aspects of getting to that balance, right? Of moving towards that balance. This process of inching towards the next step or the next iteration of what balance can look like is a dance, right? It's a performance art. It's alive. It's not like this masterpiece that we've created and we can hang on the wall, right? It's an ever-evolving thing. Astrologically, especially with this full moon, right? I think it's interesting to consider that the sun is in Libra, which we consider fallen in the essential dignities doctrine in traditional astrology, and that sun in Libra is ruled by Venus in Leo. And we also have the moon in Aries, which is ruled by Mars in Libra, and Mars in Libra is what we call in detriment, right? And so this isn't really a time, in my felt sense, to be moving super fast, right? However, it's a great time to be addressing challenging situations that require a little bit of extra balancing, right? Mercury trining Jupiter and Uranus brought up a couple things for me. One is there's an encouragement here to put words around what matters to you, even if it doesn't feel easeful, right? Mercury is associated with words, with belief systems, with systems of knowledge, right? With exploring through words. And I think this can be really interesting to consider because concepts can really get in the way, right? Having words to describe the things that we care about sometimes make it murkier, you know? For example, you may start to have a relationship with someone that you really, really like spending time with, right? And it may be a great time to start exploring what options are available for both of you based on what it is that you believe you're looking for at this time. It's much easier to get into patterns of avoiding even thinking about it because bringing intentionality means that you're also bringing some kind of weight, right, into the relational field, into the energetics of things. And sometimes you just want to keep it light. But consider the possibility that when energetics that are present in the room are not tended to, it can really get in the way of keeping that energetics light, right? So there is that balance of like, okay, maybe it's premature for us to talk about like, what are we, right? If we feel that we really want to get to know this person deeper in a more maybe romantic or non-platonic way, right? But if we don't talk about it, then that kind of becomes the elephant in the room that takes away from us being able to have the fun, right? And so when we experience something like this, the invitation is to off-gas the possibility of one or more parties getting frustrated by beginning a conversation, right? And what does it mean to carry a conversation? Right? Conversations require artfulness. There's a balance that needs to be explored quite delicately when we're having conversations, right? One thing I try to remind myself when I'm having conversations is that I have the option to hold on to my need to further my agenda, right? To get really fixed about this is what I would want, and the option to release my need to engineer an outcome, right? Conversations are opportunities to practice being honest while also being open and curious, right? So how do we strike that balance between, on the one hand, honesty, and on the other hand, openness and curiosity? One way that I think we can do this is by removing our agenda, right? Or at least holding our agenda lightly. It's human, and it's human nature to have agenda. In a lot of the context within our culture, right, especially in parts of the world where we speak English, we are conditioned to have clarity around our agenda, right? Even our language itself, the English language, really lends itself well to having an agenda, to having a clarity, right? To having, knowing exactly what the subject is or who the subject is and what or who the object is, right? Like it's a very kind of clarity driven language in some ways, and syntax, and it impacts the way that we think about things, right? And I think this is absolutely helpful. I think this is one of the most beautiful things about this language, about this way of looking at the world. But agenda can also really block open communications, right? Because our attention ended up resting on how we can get the other person to agree with us, and we stop fully listening, right? When we have our own deep-seated agenda that we are championing, often it diminishes our ability to read between the lines, right? To really get to understand, what is this person wanting to speak to me about, you know? I wouldn't go as far as saying that there's an energy of manipulation here, but it can be, right? And that is often rooted in what we believe we're going to get when we finally achieve our agenda. And so it may be really interesting for us to consider, right? What are my beliefs around that? What do I believe I will get if I achieve this outcome? You know, and to start relaxing our attachment to that outcome and to what we believe we will get when we reach the outcome. The other thing I would consider, given the full moon in Aries, given Mercury's involvements in a lot of the transits going on this week, is the importance of keeping a steady pace of rhythm, right? In terms of making progress, in terms of applying your concerted effort. So, for example, if you're working on a creative project, this may be a really good time to try a template, right? To try a schedule and to see if it works. If you have been working with a particular schedule, it may be a really great time to feel into if there are any adjustments you might want to make to that schedule, right? To bring collaborators and help from those that you feel will add value to the project. It's time to be judicious about your potential and about your limitation, right? If you're in the midst of human relational things, maybe romantic, platonic, or familial things, it may be interesting to think about what it means to cultivate patience with your own process and with the process of the other person. So this is something that I'm kind of taking from the playbook of my own life, right? Where I would say I often have this experience of coming into clarity around what's right for myself, and a clarity around what's right for a particular relationship. And then when I communicate it to the person that I'm relating to, I'm not always met with openness right away, right? Sometimes the other person may not be fully aware or conscious of what's going on, and it may take them a little bit of time to allow this new information to percolate, to shift in their being, and to recalibrate, right, according to what I just told them, you know. And there's something really potent, I think, to giving people the compassion of time, right? Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can give to a person is a little bit of extra time. Sometimes they just need to sit with the information for a little bit longer for it to finally settle in. And what do you do in these types of situations, right? Something that I personally often struggle with is how to resource myself in periods of waiting. When I'm waiting for a person to come into terms with whatever it is that I have just shared with them, it may be really frustrating, and maybe they'll never get around to it, right? So what do you do with that? I think this really points to our relationship with uncertainty, right? It speaks to how we react when we don't know what the next steps will be, when we don't know what the true reaction for the other person will be, right? That relationship that we have with uncertainty can be pretty fraught. And this may sound counterintuitive, but for me, what has felt really important is to resource myself with a lot of clarity around my needs at this moment, and then to see how I can meet those needs, right? With Vesta squaring the full moon, coming back to the self and asking ourselves to be deeply and radically honest about our own unmet needs can be a very powerful exercise. Unmet needs are really challenging topic, right? It's really challenging for us to look at our unmet needs. I think it's not because those needs themselves are inherently problematic, but because part of the reason why they were never met has to do with some sense of internal or internalized shame that we've experienced for having those needs, right? That we've imposed upon ourselves that perhaps is part of an internalization of some sort of socialization that happened externally. And so Vesta, being in Cancer specifically, squaring the full moon, is making me reflect on the tenderness, right, that can come up when we invite in honesty about our needs. There's something deeply vulnerable about admitting that we even have needs, right? We simply live in a reality that's designed to shame our needs. I've been thinking about how, for me personally, as a child, right, within the school system, my experience has been that, and I think this is really on track, right, or on brand with other people's experiences, that I've had this experience of learning to train my body to deny its own needs. I can't eat before break time, right? I have to hold my pee. I have to sit still and not speak my mind when something that the teacher said stirred something up, And as adults, we can see this reflected in a lot of our freeze patterns, right? When we are, when something's coming up within us and we don't know what to do with it, and we don't want to fight or flight, and we just kind of freeze there, right? And being adults, we have a little bit more agency within the matrix of our reality, right? And that requires us to continue the practice of holding these younger parts of us, right? That are maybe scared to admit what they need, because expressions of those needs haven't always been met with care and appreciation and understanding. And so this invitation to work with a more human, a more compassionate rhythm, and to also cultivate patience for our own process, for the processes of others, I think will be a theme for this week as well. And even if it's not coming up externally, I think there's a lot of value to really contemplate that for ourselves internally. All right. I hope that was helpful, and thank you for being here. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your presence. And I hope that you also give yourself gratitude for making the space for yourself. I'm excited to hear how it's coming along. Feel free to leave a review or a message or share it on social media. If this episode resonates with you, all of that truly helps others in finding this work. And hopefully that will help them in their path as well. I am excited for the next time that we get to see one another, for the next time that you tune into the podcast, and I'm sending you lots and lots of love. Take care.